Hello, I managed to get hold of one of these new FlySky FS-i6X transmitters along with the new X6B receiver. So I thought I'd make a video to compare these two next to the what I'm going to call the regular FS-i6 transmitter and this IA6B receiver, which I've been using for quite a while now, and they've been working very well. Big thank you to Banggood for providing these two for me to review. Now, because these are both radio compatible, that is, this receiver can be used, this transmitter can be used with this receiver, and this transmitter can be used with this receiver, I'm thinking that most people will be more interested in what's new in this receiver and what features this one has that the other one doesn't have, because probably if you've already got one of these, you're not going to want to buy another one of those, especially when we look at this and see that the changes are fairly small, and a lot of the changes that are in here you can get on this one by upgrading the firmware. But having said that, there are some nice, just a few nice new things in the firmware that's on this transmitter, so I'll have a look at that as well, and then we'll go on to have a looking at the receiver. Just to briefly outline the differences between these two, this transmitter is by default 6 channels, and you'll need to reflash the firmware if you want to do anything more than that. This transmitter is by default 10 channels. You can set it up to use 10 channels just by using the menu. The transmitters over here, we have 6 channel PWM output. Over here we also have 6 channel PWM output. On here we have iBus output, and on here we have iBus output as well. On here we have the sensor connection iBus, so that's inputs for iBus, which means that you can connect external sensor units up to here to measure things like external voltage from your LiPo battery, airspeed, altitude, temperature, and things like that. If you buy a separate external module, which I'll just show you one here, this is so there's my receiver in the bottom, and just above that there's another little black box, which is the voltage sensor that I've added, an external one to use. Now that plug, the sensor plug, does not exist on here, so you can't go adding altitude sensors or airspeed indicator sensors on here. But the nice point is that it has a voltage sensor built in, so you can connect your 4S up to 4S LiPo battery directly to here. So you don't actually need to get an external voltage sensor, and I think that's really great. That was one of the main things that I was really looking forward to about this, because it is a bit of a nuisance to have that extra space taken up and extra wiring and everything. And for me at least, voltage is probably the only one of those types of sensors that I'm ever going to want to use anyway. Here's the product listing on Banggood. It's $55 at the moment. This is with the receiver as well. And it looks like about $59 normally. And we'll have a look at, yeah, this is something that people were asking questions about, and it is a little bit confusing as to why don't they just say 10. But you need to turn the 10 on in the menu, as we'll have a look at in a minute. And the rest of the stats there you can just quickly see. So you get 6 PWM channels, 8 ppm channels, 18 if you're using iBus. Here are the other things that were in the box. There is a USB cable which has a trainer port plug on one end and a normal USB plug on the other end. There are a bunch of cables that are used to connect this to your flight controller or whatever you're connecting it to. And there are some stickers which are very strange. All 3 sets seem to be for this top panel here, that's the shape of them. But in this one we can see that there are no cutaways for the switch holes, and in the other 2 there are only cutaways for one side of the switch holes, even though both of these panels have 2 switches on them. So I don't know what you're supposed to do with those. Very strange. The cables are made from what feels like fairly nice, feels like silicone coated wire, and you get 3 cables that are all the same, and they go from these small connectors here, which are going to be for those 3 there. That will be PPM and iBus, and on this side we have the external battery voltage connector there, and they go to 3 of these whatever they're called connectors like that, and you also get a larger, I guess this must have 8 pins, because there'll be ground and VCC, and then there'll be, this is for the 6 Pwm outputs, and that goes into another bunch of the same kind of wires. These are all no, they're not all the same. Most of them have 1 pin except for this one, which is, I guess this is channel 1, and that has the ground and positive voltage on it as well. There was also a rudimentary manual included this time, which I guess is a step up, because when I bought the first transmitter there was nothing at all included of this type of thing with it. But it's not very good. It's very, very basic, and it just sort of shows you some labels of what the pieces of the transmitter are. Tells you how to turn it on. Look at that. Very complicated. And tells you how to bind. Tells you how to turn it off. And then it lists up the same specs that are on the Banggood product page. I guess they just copied them from here. What it doesn't tell you, that I know a lot of people complain about, is how to accept something when you're in the menu, which is you have to long press the cancel button. I had to look that up on the internet to figure that out. It would be good if they at least mentioned that in the user manual. So let's have a look at the differences between the transmitters first. As far as I can tell, they are physically exactly identical. The screen looks a little bit more glossier here on the left maybe, but that's just because I haven't taken the protective sticker off here yet, so it's a little bit sort of more matte looking on that side. The only thing I can see that's different in the labeling is that they have corrected this mistake. This says bind and range test for this button here, but it doesn't actually do a range test function. All it does is bind, and so it's nice to see that they have corrected that on here where it just says bind. Come on, focus. Well, you can see there's only 2 words there. It says bind key. So they fixed that. That's good. First thing I noticed when I turn these on is that we get slightly different behavior when we turn it on with the... I've got one of these switches down and the throttle is in the middle. And it tells you to put all the switches up and put the throttle in the middle. When I put the throttle down, the alarm still keeps going because I haven't put the switch up yet. And then we're good to go. And over here it's a little bit different, but... Oh, whoops, hold on. So I'll put this in the middle and I'll put that... well, you can see the switches were actually down there. A couple of switches are down. This time we get the same message, but it'll go away as soon as I lower the throttle. So note that these switches are down and it didn't care. And as we'll see a little bit later, that's because the switches are by default disabled, because they're not part of the default 6 channels, and we'll have to change something in the menu to start using the switches. The next difference I notice is that by default these have a 1-minute timeout. If you leave it alone for a minute, just don't touch anything, it'll start beeping after a minute to let you know that it's still on. This one has been changed to 3 minutes before it starts doing that, and it beeps every 5 seconds thereafter, which is better. You can, if you change the firmware on this one, you can make it 10 minutes, which is pretty good. I think 5 minutes is about right, so 3 minutes is kind of nice. I think 3 minutes is a nice step up. One thing they haven't changed, which I really would like to see, is to make the buzzer louder. Now that I've been flying using this one with the voltage sensor in the quadcopter, so that I can set an alarm on here so that it'll make a noise when the battery goes too low. That's fine if I'm flying the quad far away. So if I'm more than about, say, 40-50 meters away, the noise of the quad is not so loud that I can't hear this. But if I'm flying close nearby, this is not loud enough to get over the noise of the props of the quadcopter most of the time. So it's just too quiet, and I wish they had have upgraded the buzzer thingy in there to make it louder. That would have been nice. Maybe they can do that in the future. So the way you navigate the menus is the same as before. You do OK to... Oh, first you need to do a long press of OK to get into the menu, and then it's OK to go into somewhere. If you do a short press of cancel, it'll just return to the previous menu without changing anything, and it'll make a low-pitched beep. And if you hold it down, it'll make a high-pitched beep. and it will keep the settings you made. So this is a real trick for new players that they really should have mentioned that in the manual. I guess they have to do something kind of like that, but I thought it would have been more intuitive to do a long press of OK to do the save feature, and a lot of people complained that that wasn't very intuitive. One slight difference I noticed is the different behavior in how it wakes up after it's been sleeping. By sleeping I mean when the backlight goes off after 30 seconds or something like that. It takes 2 presses to wake it up and go into the next menu on the FS-i6. So watch what happens when I press OK here. No beep, and backlight turns on and it wakes up. So I have to press OK again to actually do something. And on the new firmware, if I just press OK once from the same state, it wakes it up and it goes into that menu as well, which I think is nicer, just less pressing and less waiting. Okay, now let's have a look at the system menu and we'll see. Oh, by the way, this is a little bit slower now, the scrolling. If you hold down the button, it'll auto scroll. It's a little bit slower speed. Pretty much all of this stuff is the same as far as I can tell, but on the 3rd page, right at the bottom, there's this new entry, Aux switches, and if we go into there, we'll see this is a new menu, and we've got switch A, B, C, D are all off. Variable resistor, I think that stands for, A and B are both on, and then we've got channel 6. So this is probably what's meant by the default of 6 channels, and these are the variable resistors up here. See, they're labeled VRA and VRB. Not very clear to read though, are they? Those texts. It looks like VAA. Yeah. Anyway, so if I just go to the setup menu and look at the display, we'll see here that we have 6 channels, and these are displaying the current positions of those channels values. And I've got the variable resistors, just turning that there, on those 2 channels. So that's the default setting. If I try and go up and down here, nothing happens. And if I look at the Aux Channels menu here, we'll see I have channel 5 and 6, and going up and down changes which variable resistor I'm using, but I only have 3 options, so I can have none, or VRB or VRA, and that's it. So to activate the full 10 channels, we need to go back to this system menu right down the bottom, and I'm just going to turn all of them on, so we should have 10 channels. Oops. I don't really understand why you need to change this to something else. I would have thought that by default, by turning everything on, you've got 10 channels anyway. And I also don't see why this has to be all off to begin with. Why couldn't it just all be on like this when you take it out of the box? A bit strange. Now if I go back into display, it looks like we only have 6 channels, but if we go down now, we can see we have some other channels. Now nothing's going to happen because I haven't assigned which switch is going to go to which channel, but if I do that now in the Aux Channels menu, this time when I go, I'm pushing the OK button here, so we'll see it's paging through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. So I'll leave 5 and 6 as they are. Let's make channel 7 switch A, channel 8 switch B, channel 9 switch C, and channel 10 switch D, long press. Now if I go to display, we should see variable resistors there, same. Now I can go page down, okay, so we've got 10 channels all showing up there, very nice. Some other differences in the menu can be found in the RX setup page. This is the regular FS-i6 here, and there is something called Pwm Output, and this is just a yes-no thing, and this lets you select between PWM and ppm, but it's not explicitly clear that if you turn this on it's going to disable PWM. Implicitly it should be clear because channel 1 of PWM is now going to be outputting ppm, but it's not clear that it's going to disable the other channels as well, but it does. So that menu option has changed to, on here we now have ASL pressure. Is this above sea level pressure? I think this is something to do with if you're using a altitude sensor on board the aircraft, so you can set what is supposed to be the pressure of ground level or something like that. Anyway, so output mode is what replaced the ppm output menu on the old one, and if we have a look at that, we now have two options in here: PWM, ppm. I guess I'm editing the left one and when I click OK I'm going to editing the right one. Okay, a little bit strange. At least now it's a little bit clearer that you're turning one of them off. So if I turn ppm on, I'm turning PWM off. At least that's, I think it's a little bit clearer like that. Damn it, what am I doing? It's kind of fiddly. Okay, there we go. Now over here on the right, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? It says S-Bus as well, but I don't see anything mentioned about S-Bus in the documentation for the receiver, which is again not very good, and I'll show you the documentation for the receiver in a minute. I'm guessing maybe it does have S-Bus output capability. Okay, let's have a look at the receiver because that's probably what's more interesting for most of you out there. Just comparing it with the size of the IA6B, it's pretty similar, just looking at the board part of it, that is. It's a little bit narrower and about the same width, but it doesn't have this big bunch of pins sticking out on the side, of course. And it's just a single board instead of two. You can see these boards are joined together. So it's quite a bit more space taken up by the IA6B, especially if you put the case on. Incidentally, some people recommend, oh, why don't you take the case off this and make it smaller? It doesn't really save you a whole lot of width. You're saving about maybe 3 millimeters of height, rather, not width. And the plus side of having the case on is that you can really strap it down nice and tight with a zip tie without worrying about bending the board or breaking any of the components on it. Right, so this, I don't know if this is the front or the back or what, but you can see on the right hand side we have some pads for the PWM outputs, and they are directly behind the plug there, so you can see which of them are going to which pins in the plug. And then we have some more pads in the top left for ppm, and I guess it's bind, B-I-N, is that what that says? Middle and the bottom we have a connector for the external battery voltage, and there's a pad for iBus there as well. So a lot of the stuff was quite nicely exposed if you wanted to go soldering wires on there yourself for some reason. And here we have a nicely RF shielded section for the main guts of it. Little LED on the top left, couple of connectors there for iBus and ppm. A button for bind, which is nice, so you don't have to carry a bind plug around with you if you want to bind your receiver to a different transmitter, although I don't know why you'd want to do that. And there's a button for update, which I'm not really sure what that does because there's no mention whatsoever in the documentation, which I'll show you in a second. And then we have two antenna connectors which are detachable, which is very nice because, as you can see, sometimes you have problems like this where your propeller munches up your antennas, and in the case of this one it's a real gnarly looking tiny, you can see the size of my fingers here next to that. It's quite a tricky soldering job to replace that if you wanted to, but in this one you just pull it off and buy a replacement. They're like $1.20 or something, or maybe they're cheap anyway, so you can just change them over even when you're out in the middle of nowhere, presuming you have one around, of course. No soldering necessary, so that's very nice. Let's have a look at the manual. I'll call it a manual, that's what they're calling it. Documentation, yes, manual. It says manual, but again, it's just a bunch of labels and some specs. If we go over on the right, it shows you the spec table, which is the same as the one on the Banggood listing. it does tell you, at least it does tell you one piece of useful information here, which is that the voltage sensor port takes up to 4S, so 18 volts. But like I say, there's no mention of S-bus anywhere on here, unless I'm missing it. No, I don't see it anyway. So it's a bit strange that they haven't mentioned it. I can't really figure out why that is. The included antennas are fairly short. They're only about 9 centimeters or so long, and they don't have any of the this sort of a bulby bit on there that the IA6B antennas come with. And I'm thinking at this point, I'll see how it goes. I'll do a range test and see how well they perform. I have a feeling these ones perform better, but sometimes I find myself wanting to thread the antenna through a small hole, in which case this bulby bit is really annoying. So I think for making a nice clean build, these ones might turn out to be easier to manage, although they are, like I say, pretty short, but nice that they are easily replaceable, because you can just buy something else like this that is longer, and this one was about 17 centimeters long by the looks of it, and you can easily swap them out, no tricky soldering to do. I can't help but notice though the significant difference in the length of the active portion of the antenna that these have. Look how different they are. There's about almost a centimeter in length difference, and if I measure this, we'll see that this section here is about 23 millimeters long. I think that's where the shielding ends there, just where the end of the grey is. And the one that I bought separately is 33. Yeah, so it's about 1 centimeter difference. So I'll do a range test or something using the ones that came with it, and maybe I'll try this one later on and see if there's any difference. Speaking of dimensions, it kind of looks like from the width of this receiver and the spacing of those holes on the two corners there, that they might have intended for it to be mounted on the same set of holes that the flight controller commonly uses. I think they're 30.5 millimeters apart from center to center, but you probably noticed that the hole is too small. It looks like 2 millimeters or so on this one rather than 3 millimeters that is common. So it's a bit strange, sort of a bit of a close but no cigar situation by the looks of it. So you might have to drill those holes out to 3 millimeters if you wanted to mount them on there like that, which is not a bad idea actually. You could use the same screws and you wouldn't have to use double-sided tape or some other way of sticking it on. Okay, I have the transmitter and the receiver bound to each other now, and I found that it can run, the receiver that is, can run right down to 3 volts, which is quite nice if you wanted to run it off a 1-cell LiPo battery for some reason. It shouldn't be a problem. I've just connected it through the Flip 32 here just for convenience to connect these two wires together, so I'm not really doing anything with that just at the moment. But if I turn this down, the alarm is going to go off because the alarm is set to go off at 4 volts or below. But you can see though that it's running. So it's 3 volts power input, and internal voltage 1 is showing 3 volts on here as well. But it's working. So it's quite annoying, isn't it? But if you wanted to run it off a single cell LiPo battery, there you go, you could. I'm just using the Betaflight configurator here to check the Pwm output in this case, and all of my sticks are working okay, and then I've got on here channel 5, 6 are aux 1 and 2, and then I've got the 2 switches over here, and I get nothing past 8 channels though, of course, so these two are channels 9 and 10 here, but they don't do anything on ppm. So let's try iBus and make sure we've got all of the 10 channels. Alright, now I'm using iBus, and I have again my sticks, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now I get aux 5 and 6 as well. So there are all of my 10 channels working, and just to recap what you need to do to change from ppm to iBus, you of course need to change the plug here from the ppm plug to the iBus plug. Over here you need to change it from receiver channel 1 to channel 4 in the case of using UART2, which is what I'm doing. and then in your Betaflight configuration you need to turn, in this case UART2 needs to be set to serial RX, and in the configuration tab you need to select RX serial and then set the serial provider to iBus. I think that's everything. And now I'm going to check that the external battery voltage sensing is working correctly. So I've plugged the little connector into the BAT plug and have that attached to the balance plug of a 4-cell battery here. I've only connected it up to 2 cells of that battery there at the moment. Just feel a little bit hesitant to give it the full voltage right yet until I've seen it working at the 2-cell level. So if we look at our main page here, we'll see that we can't actually see that by default. Instead we have this interesting SIG S1 value of 10, whatever that means. Anyway, so if we go into the menu here, I think this should be in sensors list. We can see a list of all the sensors, and there's that SIG, whoops, and we've got 2 pages here. So this has been extended from the normal FS-i6 as well, and I'll show you a little photo that I took just before of what we see in the old firmware version. It's not as many things on this list. So we have an RSSI, a noise, SIG S1, and then we have signal to noise ratio, and then we have external voltage 2, which is my 2-cell battery. So let me just connect that up to the all 4 cells, and hopefully nothing will blow up. Yeah, that's great. Now to get that to show up on my main page, I have to do choose sensors, which is the one below that sensors list. So I do choose sensors, and then I go up and down to choose. Oh, that's interesting. I can put the RSSI on that main menu as well. Well, I can only have 3. So let me just do external voltage for starters. Oh, it's taken away the other 2 that I had. So if I leave them all as none, I get those defaults, I suppose, and then if I start choosing them, I just get the ones that I chose only. I always want to have my transmitter voltage there. Then I'd want to have that one. And then let's see if we can put that RSSI one on there as well. There we go. And then presumably we also want to set an alarm for this, don't we? This menu I think has changed as well. There used to be 4 options in this sensor thing. Now there's only 2. External sensor is what we want. So let's say my alarm should go off at 8 volts. So let's just put it there for now. The alarm should go off. Might go off when I disconnect this. Okay, it's a bit slow, wasn't it? It's a bit slow to react. So that's 3 cells at the moment, so we've got 11.5. Yeah, oh well, it's working. Should be 7.7, yeah. Okay. So this is the warning, and the other one was the, if we put it down to 3 cells, 1 cell, it gives you the urgent noise. Okay, that's good. So all the functionality of the extension piece that you would have had to buy as an external connection for this one has been included in here, for voltage at least. Isn't that nice? And it's smaller. You know what would be really nice is if we could set an alarm based on the RSSI value. But I've had a look around the menus and it just doesn't seem like there's anywhere you can do that. There's only this battery alarm. That's a bummer. So it seems like a pretty nice little receiver at this point, at least. I haven't flown anything with it, but presuming it works out in the sky the same as it's doing here on the bench, should be just fine. I tried connecting the transmitter to the computer with this cable and it didn't do anything at all. Even on Windows, just absolutely no response from the computer at all. And given that last time I did this I had to use a FTDI adapter or USB serial connection adapter thingy to do the firmware upload, I'm thinking that this port here is not something that you can just directly connect to the computer and the computer knows what to do with it. So I don't really know what to do with this cable or how this could be useful. I did manage to play FPV Freerider with this other cable that I got a while ago. So I know that this transmitter itself is capable of giving out those signals out the trainer port to do computer games and stuff like that. But I just don't see it happening with this cable. So perhaps this cable is only for uploading firmware, but even in that case I don't think you could use it just this alone. Not sure what you're supposed to do with this. So I guess to summarize, if you already have an FS-i6 transmitter and you're okay with just the 6 channels, there's probably not much point getting one of these. If you do want the 10 channels but you're too scared or too lazy to do the firmware update and you don't mind spending a few dollars, you can get one of these to have the 10 channels. If you don't have any transmitter, of course, then I would start with one of these rather than just the normal FS-i6. I mean, it's only $5 more or something, especially considering that you would get this, which has the voltage, the LiPo battery voltage sensor in it as well. So it's a much better deal, I think. I just noticed the other day that they are about to start selling these separately now. Unfortunately, when I was approached by Banggood to do this review, they were only selling the transmitter and the receiver as a set, so I don't know why they couldn't swing it just to send me the receiver only, but unfortunately this is how it turned out. Well, fortunately, I guess, because we could look at the transmitter as well. But if you want to get one of these separately, they are about $12. They are about to be... It's a pre-order, so they're not actually there yet, but they'll be there on December 2nd. We'll see. I've seen these dates just change and change and change, but never mind. Let's hope it'll be December 2nd. So anyway, of course I haven't done any actual usage of this, so it's not a review, it's just a first look. But hopefully I'll be able to get this up in the air on something and do an actual flight review and maybe a range test comparison with this guy here in the near future, weather permitting, and we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.